I'm Betsy Wilkerson, City Council, District 2, Position 2. Let's talk. In my opinion, from my personal experience, being Black is actually powerful. We as a culture, and me, have taken something that other people might see as a deficiency, and I count it as a strength because it is who I am. And all that has fed into that to get me and make me who I am today. You know, it's interesting because my mom brought us here from Mississippi in 1963 on the train across country with her 4 children. So I was very young, but growing up here in Spokane for me, we had a very close-knit Black community. We lived pretty much in the same geographical area. All our Black churches were interconnected, so every church was my church and every family was my family. And even today, those relationships are strong as we talk about our history. So in many ways, I grew up in a bubble in Spokane. I grew up in the Black bubble. And so everything we needed, from affirmation to redirection, spankings, as they were called back in those days, I got that in the Black community. So I felt pretty good. It was as I got older and I was exposed more to the whole community that I really started understanding some of the challenges and actually discrimination. Because I didn't know as a kid what I didn't know. We hadn't been taught that. And I will tell you, old Black folks didn't talk about that. My parents never talked about growing up in the South and picking cotton and talking about the man or Mr. Jim. They just kind of dealt with that and then protected their children from it as best they could. My mom left Mississippi. She was actually looking for a better life. She was a single Black woman. She had a friend here who had a beauty shop, and my mom was a beautician. And my mom's name was Louisiana, so they called her Lulu. And she said, Lulu, you ought to come out here and open this shop with me. So we came here. My mom worked in the shop. She had some friends that gave us housing. And honestly, if we had not arrived in Spokane, I don't know what my life would look like, my siblings' life, definitely not my children's life, and the opportunities that Spokane has provided for us.
See the direct effects of that.
You know, that's good because my older siblings always talked about picking cotton, and I would laugh because I was too young to pick cotton. So that was kind of the age break for us. But I have a brother who is married to a white woman. I have beautiful nieces and nephews, but he always spoke to me about how uncomfortable he is and was with his wife. They had taken a trip across country. They were driving to Mississippi, and he goes, sis, I kept a gun, and we only stopped in places where there were lots of people because of that fear of him being with the white woman. And so today, he still feels that, and he still feels targeted. He is just hyper vigilant about looking over his shoulders, as many Black people are. And I will tell you, Black men do not sit with their backs to the door. Black men always sit with their backs to a wall because they do not want to be surprised. And it's something that I found myself unconsciously doing. I do not want somebody coming up behind me and I don't know what's happening. So yeah, I've experienced it a lot more in high school because Black girls didn't have a whole lot. We weren't really playing sports back then, and we weren't seen as cute, and we weren't cheerleaders, and we just went to school, did our thing, and went back home. And as a preacher's kid, I got the double whammy because I couldn't go anywhere without somebody seeing me and calling my mama before I got home. And that's just how the Black community was. We were raised by everybody. And you better not talk back unless you had a death wish in your life. That's just something we did not do. So that respect was ingrained in us. And I'm kind of disappointed. Generationally, I think that's kind of fallen off. but my grandkids now cannot call an adult by their first name. Has to be Mr. or Mrs., but you just don't get to say, hey, Jim. That would get you a backhand. And black folks know what a backhand is. The challenge really started before I got to council. So there weren't many opportunities for black women to become engaged in anything. So I joined community service organizations, and I was usually one of one. And I would go and I would serve, and then I would go home. Not really having friendships, because in my community, those weren't my people, but we were in it to do the good work. So that prepared me a lot for city council being one of one. But I reiterate this all the time. Black folks are not a monolith. We all have our different experiences. We have some similarities, probably in most areas, but we've all lived a different life. And that's what I had to keep saying when I went on council, like, hey, I don't speak for all black people. I can only speak for Betsy and share my experiences going forward. And so they kind of wanted to put me in a box. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. You do not expect that behavior from dominant culture. Y'all speak on many different topics, and nobody says you have to be in alignment on what you talk about. So I just did not buy into that narrative. I do not speak for all black people. So that expectations, Spokane is progressive, and we have a lot of allies. But even that, I think, is challenging for them in how to support us as people of color. You need to support and not lead. And I think we still have a ways to go in that arena as to educate, not only for us, not only for me as a black woman, but for the people who are around me. I want to say we need to really work on empowering ourselves. So at my age, I grew up doing James Brown. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And that used to be our mantra all the time. And now it feels like society, like, oh, you can't say that. It's not accepted. Oh, it's like that reverse racism. Oh, well, what about white people? I gotta tell you a story. Last year, I went to the vaccine clinic at East Central, and I got my vaccine, got my shot taken. I wore a shirt that said Black Excellence on it. I thought it was pretty cool. I got pushback. Well, aren't other cultures excellent? It's like, really? I just wanted to affirm my culture, not saying yours isn't, but I wanted mine to know that we are excellent too. And that's the kind of stuff that makes us crazy. Any other culture can promote theirs and you don't get that backlash. But once you talk about the pride in our race, then it's like, oh, y'all think y'all all that, huh? It's like, no, we don't think we're all that. In fact, my mama said, Betsy, you're not better than anybody else, but you are different. And I have embraced that my entire life. Not better, but I am different. And I accept it, and people around me just have to accept that. But I can't let that hold me back based on how they think. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today. You know, the responsibility I really feel on council is that leadership and that role modeling. And I've said it before, I did this because my grandkids thought it was a pretty cool thing to do. But I wanted them to be able to see themselves in places that they have not traditionally seen themselves. I wanted them to have access to someone who was elected, because when I go to the store or I go to church, people who have known me all my life come up and say, hi, Betsy. Oh, Council Member Wilkerson. I said, no, I will always be Betsy to you because I grew up with you. I cannot tell you how empowering that is and how humbling at the same time to have to be in that space, because it is a serious responsibility. And I don't want to make any missteps that would hinder or be a barrier for any other person of color coming behind me. Now, just a minute, I am human, so I don't want to leave that out. But as best as I know how, to be that role model in that face and the voice. And it's kind of funny. So I'm in meetings, and it's like, you know what? I'm not going to give up my culture and how I talk just to be in these meetings. And there are sometimes I have used words that are very cultural, and people look at me like, what did she just say? I use this phrase a lot. It's like, y'all know I'm kind of cray-cray, right? And they looked at me like nobody knew what cray-cray was in that audience. And so I did have to kind of laugh about it. I did share it with them afterwards, but you know what? How we even communicate. But I'm not going to give up my culture and who I am because I'm leading. I don't have to be assimilated. I still get to be Betsy. I still get to communicate the way I communicate. I will not let anyone take that away from me. So I think that's important too. We don't have to give that up to be part of anything or be with anybody. So I was in high school at Lewis and Clark. I played the flute. I no longer play the flute. But back then, I was first chair flute. And in those days, the first chair flute always got to be the drum major in the Lilac Parade. So I was all excited about being the drum major. And that year, the band director picked the second chair flute to be the drum major because she was white. And it's at that moment that it hit me. It's like, so what's different this year than all the other years? And I know it's kind of a silly thing now, but back then, that was so hurtful to me. And it was the first real experience of racism. It was my awareness moment. Again, because I had lived in this very protected black bubble in my community, and then to have that happen, I was a little bit oblivious, you know, because again, we don't know what we don't know, and we didn't talk about racism. Not, at least the old folks didn't talk to the young folks about racism. But yeah, from that point on, I started looking at everything differently. And that was my sit up and pay attention moment, Betsy, because the world is not fair. And it was a pivotal moment. So from that, I actually left and went to a HBCU in Texas, because I thought I need to be around other people who look like me. And just to show you how that worked out, I had never been around so many black people in my entire life when I went to a HBCU in Texas. And I got to Texas, and they called me a white girl, because I was a product of my environment. For all you older people, KJRB, that was the only radio station in town, and it did not play R&B music. So, and we did not have anyone who had the cool dances in Spokane like they had in the South. So I feel like I've kind of been on both sides of the equation of experiencing it and hopefully not being part of it. I think it's subtle. When you are in a position of power, which this position is a position of privilege, I recognize that. But people react to you differently because they don't want you to potentially hamper or hinder something they've got going on. And walking in that space is weighty and it's wearing. And at the end of the day, I literally just have to go home and just shut down and reaffirm myself. I think that's a skill a lot of black folks have learned, and I'll speak specifically to black women. We have to know how to encourage ourselves. I learned that in church. The scripture talk about encourage yourself because you cannot look for that from others because they probably won't be there when you need it the most. We have to encourage ourselves, and that's why I am so into encouraging anybody else, but especially our folks of color, to step up, accept the challenge, It's going to be rough. I'm not going to lie. It does have its moments, and I have wondered, what am I doing here? But I cannot quit, and I will not quit. And we all know this. When you are in these spaces, I realize that I am not only standing on the shoulders of my mama and my grandmama, but all the other Black people that have come before me, whether they live in Spokane or not, and there's a large number who have played a role in molding me to who I am today. And I would never think about disappointing the people who have invested in me, my community, and my family. That's what gives me the motivation and the determination to continue to show up and to speak up and to not step down when that's where I'm supposed to be. Well, I have to start that off by saying we cannot legislate the change of people's minds and hearts. We just can't. It's been tried, has not been very successful. But what I would like to see, and my hope is that even though we have these differences, which many start by the color of our skin, that my grandchildren will not have to be having these same conversations that I'm having today. And funny, I'm sure that's what my mama wished for me. But I am wishing that for them and all the kids of color. I closed my eyes today thinking about something. If I didn't really think about it, I would swear it was 1969 with some of the challenges that we're facing today. I would like to get to a point where truly we're not having this discussion anymore. And it's not the exception, it's actually normalized. That we are people who have different life experiences that all bring something very unique to the table. It's a big table. There's room for everybody.